Welcome to the Living Faith Missionary Church Podcast. You're about to listen to a message from Pastor Chris Starn, Senior Pastor at Living Faith in Yoder, Indiana. It is our prayer that this message is an encouragement and a blessing to your life. Turn your Bibles to the book of Isaiah. We're in chapter 37. And if you remember from a couple weeks ago what was going on, there was always this thing hanging over the head of Jerusalem and of the people of Judah, that the Assyrians were going to come and they were going to attack. They were going to take them over because they were supposed to be a vassal state, and they had Hezekiah decided, I'm not going to give you any tribute anymore. And he had aligned himself with some of the other nations around him, attempted to get some protection, didn't happen. And finally what we have is Assyria has invaded, taken out all of the surrounding cities that were supposed to be the buffer zones. And the king of Assyria is crushing Judah at this point. He's standing outside of Jerusalem, and he sends his officials to parley, to talk. He decides it might be better for them to surrender than for us to destroy the city, kill a bunch of people. I lose a lot of men. It just made a lot more sense to try to get them to surrender. Because, believe me, everyone knew at that time that no one could stand against this invading force. The Assyrian army was ruthless. Their military was focused on one thing, and that's total domination. Now, archaeologists today have unearthed a lot of artwork, a lot of things that they've unearthed that depicts some of the things that the Assyrian army did when they conquered. Because when people would come back and they'd tell the stories, the army would come back and tell stories, artists would make these stone cuttings of what was going on. And usually what they would do is they would impale the enemies that they caught and they killed on stakes. Why did you do that? Because if there's anybody else around, that was a way of saying, look, if you don't do what we tell you, you're going to end up like this. A lot of times they'd cut off heads, and they'd leave them in piles around the body, or piles of bodies around, they leave the heads there. They were basically the Nazis of their time. There were a total of 46 cities that were around Jerusalem that had been buffer zones, that had been completely destroyed. And now the army was at the doorstep of Jerusalem. We saw in chapter 36 that Sennacherib sent his officials, Hezekiah sent his officials, but he had given them strict orders: do not respond. No matter what they say, do not say a single word. And they were silent. They knew better than to disobey their king, Hezekiah. So the Judah officials, they were silent. They did as he commanded. And then now Eliakim and his team have returned. They've ripped their clothes because they are in so much grief over what's going to happen. They know that there's nothing they can do. And they inform Hezekiah of these words that Rabshakeh, the official of Sennacherib, had given them. So the question is, how does Hezekiah respond? I mean, we've seen a lot of the political things going on recently, especially recently in the last couple of years. And we've got a lot of turmoil going on in the world. And we always wonder, how are we going to respond? How is the president going to respond to this? And there are different ways the president could do that. The president could sit there and say, okay, I'm going to just not say anything, which sometimes for most presidents is better that they don't. They don't understand how far-reaching their words have an effect on everything from the economy to everybody's, how we feel about things. Or they could have bravado and you could pound their chest. Or they can be actually reticent and be kind, which doesn't normally happen. Normally the presidents either don't say anything or they beat their chest. So what's Hezekiah going to do? How is he going to respond? Is he going to gather the army? And is he going to make a stand? I mean, that's what most people would do. Most kings would do. I'm going to, they're coming after me. I think I better go ahead and I better just try to at least defend ourselves. I mean, we've been talking a good show this whole time. Why don't we actually live up to it? But what is he going to do? Hezekiah is going to do something that probably is going to surprise most people. He's going to actually turn to God. He does the only thing he knows that he can do.